False.
Wow. Hey, much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you guys taking the time to do that. I just wanted to go ahead and be able to redo the live I did yesterday. I got interrupted a lot by YouTube, kept cutting me off. I was live and wouldn't let me really finish what I was reading. We only read a couple of the first pages of the book anyway, so I was able to redo that, edit it out, the bad parts, and then re-record all the other reading that we didn't get yesterday, plus another book. It's a lot of good information we're gonna go over today. I just want to say, hey, don't try to not take any of this personal. It's just for your knowledge and awareness. And I didn't write these books, okay? So let's just go ahead and get into them. All right, we're gonna get into these two books. Let's just see what they have to say, okay? I hope you enjoyed the reading. All right, so the first book we're gonna get into is chapter 3 of this book, The Messenger, The Rise and Fall of Elijah Muhammad by Carl Evans. Very popular book. A lot of you probably already have read some of this, right? No matter what you feel about it, we're just gonna read, see what it says, right? We're gonna read chapter 3 of that book. All right, guys. So we're gonna get to chapter 3 of this book. Again, it's called Paradise Lost. That's where I got the title. All right. The train ride from Macon to Detroit catapulted Elijah from Dante's Inferno to paradise. So we're talking about a little segment of Elijah's life, right? Because this book is primarily about Elijah, but this chapter mentions a lot of other people and a little bit of the background that some people might not know. So we're just gonna get it like it's the first time, if anything, and we're just gonna pull out the babies, dodge the hijacks, right? So Elijah's traveling from Macon to Detroit. Detroit hardly qualified as the idyllic promised land, trumpeted by the Chicago Defender, but to a newcomer, the quality of life there seemed heavenly compared with the South. Though it sounds allegorical, Elijah's new life really did begin in Paradise, or Paradise Valley. That was the unlikely name for the black enclave in Detroit's Hamtramck area. Although it was segregated, except for black patrons of white-owned businesses, Paradise was not without its advantages and seemed to hold as much promise as its biblical namesake. Located only a few miles from the mercantile Detroit River, the valley reflected a kaleidoscope of life in a modern metropolis. It was the epicenter of million-dollar playgrounds owned by such tycoons as Henry Ford, Walter P. Chrysler, and Ransom Eli Olds. Railroad tracks swirled around neighborhoods like lace on a Victorian corset. Days and nights were filled with whistles from assembly plants, the chomping of metal stamping machines, the occasional roars of military and commercial planes, and peacock-like puffs of smoke from trains and boats and Asian automobiles. To new arrivals, the industrial noises were particularly soothing at night, as it reassured these transplanted Tashtahajak, or they say in Africans, or they mean black folks, recently transplanted coming from the South, that they were growing economically along with the rest of America. Segregated areas such as Paradise Valley and Harlem challenged the African American's creativity, his ability to make something where there appeared to be nothing, and he responded by creating a new culture. Elijah was fortunate in that his arrival in Detroit coincided with this cultural revolution. Although the period is usually known as the Harlem Renaissance, the blossoming of black culture extended from Maine to California, and its exciting developments were not confined to literature, music, painting, and sculpture. There were equally revolutionary advances in the social and hard sciences. Black political and religious philosophies underwent a radical shift, and there were industrial breakthroughs at the hands of blacks as well as whites. Talking about crayon colors here. President Theodore Roosevelt may have picked the nation's interest or piked the nation's interest in black culture in 1906 when he noted the African American influence on Antonin Dvorak's New World Symphony. All right, listen to this very famous symphony guy. Listen to what he got influenced by. It says, after reading Dvorak's article on how he had influenced, or he had been influenced by black music. All right, this famous symphony guy, Dvorak, he's like, man, I was really, really influenced by black music, so-called black. Roosevelt suggested that African American music might inform the basis of an American school of music. By the roaring 20s, the influence of blacks on American music was unmistakable. All right, so-called black. Scott Joplin, W.C. Handy, Gertrude Ma Rainey, and scores of musical prodigies gave the nation its first taste of the originality and innovation to come. Ragtime, the blues, and jazz blazed a trail from Basin Street in New Orleans to Harlem, the mecca of the new Negro, in parentheses, right? One of the first musical teams to reap real financial rewards were songwriters U.B. Blake and Noble Sizzle. Their song, I'm Just Wild About Harry, from the Broadway musical Shuffle Along, was an immediate hit. A new assertiveness in black literature, apparent in the works of Langston Hughes, Jean Toomer, or Toomer, and Countee Cullen, found its visual counterparts in the paintings of Romare Bearden and the sculptures of Margaret Burroughs. The social theoretics espoused by Washington and Turner, both of whom died in 1915, were reshaped by Harvard-educated scholars such as W.B. Du Bois and Alain Locke, and by self-educated philosophers such as Marcus Garvey and Noble Drew Ali. All right? After moving into his parents' crowded apartment for his first few months in Detroit, Elijah found work at the American Nut Company, manually separating the steel, shaving from the nuts and bolts. The job paid well, but he hated it. As he cleaned the finished products, the tiny metal shards cut into his hands, leaving them swollen and painful. After 6 months, he quit and took a job at the American Wire and Brass Company. The work was also debasing and demanding, but at least he could move his fingers at the end of his shift. The pay also made the job more palatable. His weekly wage of $30 was more than double the $12 he had earned at Southern Railway after 3 pay increases. By the fall of 1923, he had saved enough money to send for Clara and the children, and was able to afford the rent on a matchbox apartment. Elijah had assumed that his huge pay increase would be sufficient, but after his family arrived, he realized that $30 in Detroit and $12 in Macon afforded him the same precarious standard of living. The family moved into a 3-room house at 8483 Rockwood, a dwelling so close to the tracks that if you stuck your head out of the window at the wrong time, you'd lose it to a passing train. All right, you guys hear that? See how close the train passed by their apartment building? All right, this is when he moved to Detroit. Can you imagine the noise? Right, so you got the train passing. It says an imaginary partition in the living room separated it from the master bedroom. As time went by, the narrow confines and incessantly noisy neighborhood, a very noisy neighborhood, had Elijah longing for the openness of the farm and its quietude after dusk. But going home again was just not an option. So remember, he was coming from the country in the south, right, Georgia. Failure was unheard of in the promised land. Besides, there were really nothing to go back for. With 2 toddlers and a job that demanded every ounce of his energy, The grim realities of his new life gradually began to eat away at Elijah's initial impressions of Eden. There was no promised land to own in the north, just landlords threatening eviction of those who fell behind in their rent. A better name would have been the Promises Land. One of the promises Elijah fell for was easy credit. The interest rates were so high on the household goods he bought on time that he was soon engulfed in debt and was chasing his paychecks like a dog chasing its own tail. Despite the millions of dollars generated by Central City Industries, little of it profited the residents of Paradise Valley. Some African Americans did prosper in the North, but no more so than in the South, where at least there wasn't a pretense of racial equality. In the North, the newcomer lived like a greyhound gasping for an illusory reward at a dog race. Paradise Valley residents became modern Rip Van Winkles, sleeping in the same apartment for years, even though the size of most families doubled or tripled. Elijah and Clara were no exception. Their second daughter, Lottie, was born January 2nd, 1925, and another son, Nathaniel Paul, on June 23rd, 1926. Elijah's strongest shock, perhaps, was the realization that white terrorist organizations were as big and powerful in the North as in the South. So the KKK, which many Southern sojourners thought lived only in the lower half of the nation, actually, listen to what they're going to say, proved a formidable enemy in the North as well. In Detroit alone, membership rolls exceeded 70,000 just in Detroit alone. In the early 1920s, in the summer of 1925, more than 50,000 Klan families attended a convocation called a Klanvocation in Lansing, Michigan. And by that time, national membership had surpassed 5 million, with the majority in the North. There was more KKK followers, right, in the North than in the South, contrary to what they try to make us think. Listen to what they're telling you here. In Indiana, their numbers were so great that the Klan and the Black Shirts, an anti-Black group inspired by the Italian fascists, routinely charged through Black communities like hell on horseback. They regarded the Great Migration as a plague on decent wages, good neighborhoods, and the American dream. All right, and look at that. Just, history keeps repeating, right? And now you got another set of people coming in doing the same thing. This is how they did things, man. These Northerners, supposedly champions of egalitarianism, who had expressed shock at the horrors of Black life during slavery, saw nothing wrong with discriminatory racial policies that led to dark ghettos in essentially every major city in the North. Most African Americans turned to the church for respite. All right, that's where they turned to, the church and the church leaders, right? But the problems arising from the ghetto squalor were far beyond anything that the church could deal with. And so the only institution that had made slavery bearable was found wanting by the slaves' grandchildren. The Black clergy, who kept their people docile for a century. Who? The Black clergy, your priests, your pastors, your reverends, what kept their people docile for a century by assuring them that everything would improve once they reached the promised land, quickly changed the promise. Now that they were in the promised land, the devout were being asked to believe that the land of milk and honey awaited them, not in the North, but in the hereafter. The faithful who cooled themselves with cardboard fans bearing the image of a Caucasian Christ, read the Holy Bible with its pictures of Caucasians while surrounded by statues and images of white angels, began to question the relevancy of Christianity. All right. So this book, I believe, is from the 70s or 80s. You guys can know, the author when he wrote this. Eventually, social organizations created or controlled by so-called Blacks began supplanting the church as the anchor in African American life. Middle-class Blacks found organizations such as the NAACP, the Congress of Racial Equality, or CORE, and the NUL, NUL, more socially progressive than the church. But these groups had little appeal for lower-class Blacks who lacked the free time, the economic means, and the patience for the pace of change countenanced by such organizations. They were tired of waiting for the hereafter. They wanted a better life here now. From the ashes of incinerated dreams and the conflagration of Red Summer arose a leader who convinced African Americans that they held the keys to heaven in their collective willpower. So, okay, here we go. I remember, pull out the babies, that's the hijack. We got Marcus Garvey, right? Walter Plecker's friend, yeah, a stout West Indian immigrant with classic Nubian skin color and facial features, preached that by uniting with a common goal against a common enemy, black people could create heaven on earth. A Bible-taught Pan-Africanist, right? Pan-Africanist Garvey dismissed such leaders as Du Bois and Roy Wilkins as blue-veined mulattoes who were too wedded to integration to solve the problems of Africans of the diaspora. All right, that's the hijack in both ways. Known as Moses to the millions who joined the Universal Negro Improvement Association, or the UNIA, all right? Marcus was known as Moses. Garvey infuses political rhetoric with enough spirituality to attract many blacks who felt as though their souls were homeless. For Garvey and his followers, who included the young Elijah Poole, that's Elijah Muhammad, he was one of the followers first, he was a Garveyite. Listen, Elijah Poole, a black nationalism was as much as religion as a political philosophy. Indeed, a key propagandist in the UNIA was the Reverend James Morris Webb, who in 1919 published the book A Black Man Will Be the Common Universal King. Paraphrasing Webb, Garvey declared in 1922, "Look to Africa for the crowning of a black king. Look to Africa. He shall be the Redeemer in Africa." That's what Garvey was telling people. God Garvey asserted, created man in Africa. All right, see what he's saying, telling people? In the region now known as Ethiopia. See, the thing he doesn't know is that there was the three Ethiopias, right? Or the Western Ethiopians. Garvey espoused many concepts that Elijah was introduced to as a child, and a much of his philosophy echoed Turner. In 1922, Garvey convened UNIA's first international convention in New York, which was attended by representatives from 25 different countries. As the featured speaker, Garvey called for a new nation in Africa for African Americans. All right, a new nation where? Trying to take you to Africa, trying to disconnect you from a lot of your history by trying to say you're African and make you move to Africa when he never went over there. He never visited, he never went over there. Marcus Garvey himself. So he's trying to put so-called African Americans over there, right? So-called Black Americans. Disconnecting them from the American Indian heritage, their Black European heritage, and a lot of different histories connected to their land in the Americas. Continuing on Garvey, he said he envisioned a country much like America. And he's talking about in Africa, one he called the United States of Africa. He also urged Black people to hang pictures of a Black Madonna and a child in their homes. Hey, don't just use the white idols, use the so-called Black idols. Where is the Black man's government? Garvey asked rhetorically. Where is his king and kingdom? Where is his president, his country, and his ambassador, his army, his navy, his men of big affairs? On special occasions, Garvey dressed as a flamboyantly as the bejeweled Henry VIII. Oh, Garvey dressed like the European. Oh, you mean when he was dressed like a Knights of Malta? Why did they dress him and his people like Knights of Malta? As it says here, he and his army, in parentheses, wore colorful uniforms that reflected the British influence in the West Indies. Reflected what? British influence. Are we talking about his real ancestry? British Irish influence? Looking like a Knights of Malta? That dress, that flamboyantly bejeweled and dress he had, influence, huh? British influence in the West Indies. He rode in a carriage during parades, surrounded by men dressed in maroon and yellow wearing hats with big white plumes. By 1921, Garvey was the chief executive officer of perhaps the largest black corporation in the Western world. He sold shares in his Black Star steamship line and created Negro World, the most successful black newspaper in the nation's history. All right. So Black Star Steamship, where he was getting funded, remember, on my Marcus Garvey video, he was getting funded by white supremacists, even his boy Walter Plecker and all these people, they were down with him. Black Star Steamship headquarters was here in Costa Rica on the Caribbean side. The building went on fire, a couple years back, but it was a historic place. I think they rebuilt it. Still in the hood. It still doesn't really look like anything great today. But the headquarters was here. He was exporting bananas, fruits, coffee, and things like that. He was making a lot of money doing that. He didn't pay the local people, which were black folks. He didn't pay them good. He's just running his business. And he didn't never use those ships to go bring anybody into Africa, where he was promising to literally do with the ships. This was his business. He was a merchant, trade, export, import. He's making money on that. And then, yeah, he had this newspaper as well. It says, in the midst of Garvey's rise as the champion of African culture, the greatest archaeological discoveries of the 19th century came out of Africa. Listen, dodge the hijack. After years of excavating, British and adventurer Howard Carter found the ancient tomb in Egypt's valley, modern day theme park Egypt, not the ancient one, of the kings that contained the sarcophagus of the 14th century BC pharaoh Tutankhamun. Carter also uncovered the tombs of Thutmose IV and Queen Hatshepsut. These discoveries illuminated a glorious past that until then had been the stuff of legend. Stuff of legend, huh? What if they staged all that? And what if they found those mummies here and then brought them over there? Ha! They did stage a moon landing, right? These discoveries, says African Americans beamed with pride as stories reached America's shores about the young pharaoh's dark complexion and the dark skin tone of other figures unearthed during Carter's excavations. So the thing is, they ain't telling people when they excavate bones here, old mummies, that they also are matching so-called dark complexion people, just like the ones in Europe, right? Shutter Man and Seated Woman and all these other ones that they're finding over there too. Dark complexion people all over the world, not just in Africa is the point. So again, when you're talking about a West African slave trade, they're not even including Egypt in that, or Nubia, like Henry Gates was saying and laughing, like, what you mean you're from pharaohs, right? They weren't the ones getting enslaved. They were in Eastern Africa. So it doesn't even fit the false West African to America slave trade story. Either way. But yeah, now they got people looking at Africa is what he's trying to say in those times. Hendrik van Loon's Story of Mankind was published around the same time, and his controversial thesis that civilized societies originated in Africa, like Darwinism, right, spread to Asia and came lastly to Europe, made the book an immediate bestseller. It was released in America only weeks after Carter discovered Tutankhamun's tomb. So this is what they're doing, right? Now they got everybody forgetting about the ancient Americas at this time, working hard to make sure everybody focused on Africa. Carter's discovery and Van Loon's research gave African Americans their first real inkling that their history was ages older than the slave trade. See, so this is going with the whole false slave trade and that everybody came from Africa, and now they're connecting them to East Africa when they haven't even said where in West Africa they had come out of, who's their people there, and how do they link to so-called East Africans, right? Now remember the definition of Ham, right? You guys remember the definition of Ham? He said the progenitor of the dark race is not the Negroes, but the Egyptians, Ethiopians, and people like that. All right. But you see how the hijack comes in. Oh, you all pharaohs now, descendants of pharaohs. But ancient Egypt was here, so see, that's a white lie. Get it? Garvey's surprising success angered black middle-class intellectuals who dismissed him as an admiral confidence man. Or amoral, sorry. He was amoral. Civil rights leader argued because he met with clan leaders. Listen, because he met with clan leaders, like I was saying, he was dealing with white supremacists. There's a whole other book letting you know to discuss a peaceful solution to the racial animosity between blacks and whites. That's what he wants to sugarcoat it as. They had the same objective, guys. White supremacists wanted to ship black folks to Africa, take their land, disconnect them from being Indian and all that, even more. And then, Marcus Garvey wanted to put everybody in Africa, so they had common goals. They were funding him, guys. We showed that in Marcus Garvey video. Go check it out. Got an old one and a newer one, right? They had the same goal: turn you to so-called African and get over there to take your land and your rights and your heritage, your family's history. So again, as it says here, he met with clan leaders. It's another person telling he met with clan leaders. You don't know what they were talking about in their meetings. He was a confidence man, they contended, because he liberated money from his followers' pockets without actually sending them to Liberia or other African nations where he sought repatriation. Listen, because he liberated money from his followers. He took their money without actually sending them to Liberia or another African nation. That was the whole plan why he was collecting money from black folks. Listen, he took their money where he sought repatriation. Garvey's talk of returning them to Africa, critics charged, was that and nothing more. It was all talk, like I was saying earlier. He used his Black Star Line ship to make himself rich, import, export, and he didn't pay the people good. The local black folks that were working here in Costa Rica for him, he didn't pay them nothing. It was like slavery, literally. At least one prominent government official was equally angry about Garvey's success. J. Edgar Hoover viewed Garvey as someone whose sole purpose was to instigate racial discord. You want to instigate racial discord? That's what you're actually doing. You might be a plant. And consequently made neutralizing Garvey and the UNIA as one of his top priorities. He hired at least 4 UNIA members as informants assigned to furnish the FBI with enough documentation about the organization to warrant a federal probe. By the time Elijah joined the UNIA, Garvey was caught in this counterintelligence web. On Friday, January 13th, 1922, some 14 months before Elijah left Macon, Garvey was arrested on charges of using the Postal Service to defraud his supporters in connection with the sale of stock in the Black Star steamship line. The government alleged in its indictment that the campaign Garvey and his top aides launched to raise funds for an additional steamship was a hoax. The crux of the indictment rested upon allegations made by the informants. What few people knew then, or today, for that matter, was that the indictment was the real fraud. A government audit conducted while Garvey was incarcerated revealed gross prosecutory misconduct. The prosecution had suborned, perjured testimony, fabricated incriminating documents, and committed other acts of misfeasance to guarantee Garvey's conviction. All right, so the FBI did some dirty stuff because they really wanted to go after him. But it doesn't mean he wasn't still a Pan-African trying to make you go to Africa. And actually try to making a lot of money off of black folks' dreams and aspirations and hopes. Yeah, he never even went over there. On January 16, the UNIA called a press conference to declare its confidence in Garvey, but by then the organization was mortally wounded. Detractors, primarily black leaders of the civil rights movement, saw the indictment as a chance to grab the reins of power from Garvey, and their public denunciations made it easier for the public to believe in Hoover's counterintelligence operations. On June 21st, 1923, Garvey, who made the mistake of acting as his own lawyer, was found guilty as charged and sentenced to 5 years imprisonment. I feel the dawn for the Negro race will come, and my children and people will appreciate my sacrifice. In parentheses, he told the court after he was sentenced, I am satisfied to serve any sentence the court may impose. In parentheses, he was given 4 months to file an appeal. Most of my troubles, Garvey told reporters during an interview from his cell at the infamous Tombs prison in New York, are the results of efforts of my opponents of the colored race. They are light-colored Negroes who think that the Negro can always develop in this country. They also resent the fact that I, a black Negro, am a leader. All right. That's what he calls himself, but I guess, they has a lot of coming from Jamaica, I know a lot of Jamaicans. I got Jamaican family. You understand? So like they they cherish their heritage, they're not just calling themselves by tags. They'll say I'm Jamaican or whatever, I'm this, I'm that, and I like I'm this, I'm a black Negro. I guess in those times you just, they're like it's more like a hey, black and I'm proud, right? I get it. But also, yeah, you're creating this tag. You're giving it more power than your genealogy. Garvey's fraud conviction was reaffirmed in March 1925, and the U.S. Supreme Court declined review. He was sent to the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary to serve the remainder of his time. The Justice Department, which had been trying to have Garvey deported as an alien enemy since Red Summer, finally had the law on its side. At the urging of influential black members of the UNIA, President Calvin Coolidge commuted Garvey's sentence to 2 years later on the condition that he leave America and not return. All right, we'll give you a pardon, but you got to go. In December 1927, Garvey was deported to Jamaica. With his deportation, the UNIA foundered under lackluster leadership and infighting. And the aftermath of his fall, the dissolution of the UNIA, land that the government of Liberia planned to sell to Garvey was leased instead to Firestone Rubber Company. Wow. A direct result of the economic pressure from the United States and Great Britain. The erstwhile emancipators fell coincided with congregational filibuster on the dire anti-lynching bill. It somehow seemed appropriate that leaders who theorized about the efficacy of legal lynchings would also treat the issue of physical lynching with an equally cavalier attitude. As the UNIA spiraled downward, so did Elijah. Strong drink became his communion, wine and festering racial animosity, the bread that sustained his dying dreams. You see? So he started drinking a lot. And this is the stories of, how, before he was in the Nation of Islam, he was out drinking and he was getting drunk. He was a drunk. Yeah, look how they're saying here. Strong drink became his communion, that fire water. He blamed white people not only for Garvey's downfall, but for the bankruptcy of the UNIA. Members who had invested their savings in Garvey's steamship stocks, like a million other lost souls, Elijah wandered from organization to organization seeking spiritual fulfillment. One of his first expeditions was into the esoteric world of Freemasonry. All right, Elijah Muhammad. One of his first expeditions was into the esoteric world of Freemasonry. He even has a book called, How to Master Freemasonry, the background or history of Freemasonry. Since the mainstream Masonic organization, the ancient Arabic order of the nobles of the mystic shrine of North America was all white, Elijah enlisted in the all-black ancient Egyptian order of the nobles of the mystic shrine of North and South America. You guys hear that? A black Shriners, or the Black Shriners, as Freemasons were known, these Black Shriners, were a large bureaucracy with a virtually impenetrable hierarchy. Impenetrable, boule, nepotism ruled. As Elijah was too new to the North to know any high-ranking officials, he soon realized that he had little chance of ever being anything but a dues-paying drone and quit the organization after a few months. He didn't just quit. When you're called master, like you're saying, hey, Master Elijah, Master, that's subliminal. Master Mason. All right. Don't like not sugarcoat. You don't just quit. You don't you don't just quit that, you know? It's not sugarcoating. You advance in it in degrees. You move up, you know. To avoid his increase in marital difficulties and the screaming toddlers at home, Elijah spent most Friday nights at local bars with friends. Gradually he started spending more time with them than with Clara and the children, and Friday's revelry stretched into Saturday night. By Sunday morning, he was unable to account for his paycheck. Wow. He would waste all his money drinking, yo. He was a drunk. Liquor was his refuge from the drudgery of work, where tired men were appendages of tireless machines, and a community where there was so much mindless violence that men lost their lives over pennies wagered in dice and card games. All right. This is during Elijah's time, right? In the hood, just like, modern hoods, His drinking and unorthodox political views made it difficult for him to get along with the white plant managers, and he found himself getting fired for even minor infractions. By early 1926, the family's meager income consisted of the money Clara earned as a maid and the pay from occasional odd jobs that Elijah stumbled into. He had to hold down 2 jobs and sometimes 3 just to keep his family from going cold or hungry. By the end of the year, his luck really began to sour. He was scrambling for work, often gladly grabbing a single week or even one day to work wherever he could find it. I worked for various companies during that time, he said later, including the Detroit Copper Company, Briggs Body, and Chevrolet Axle Company. On Friday, March 19th, Elijah went to the local bar as usual. When he left several hours later, he was so inebriated that he fell into the gutter and couldn't get up. A sharp-eyed policeman noticed him, put him in a paddy wagon, and took him to Detroit Receiving Hospital. All right, you guys hearing this? This is Elijah Muhammad's past right here. Doctors quickly diagnosed him as intoxicated and handed him back to the police. So we're not definitely judging because, we all had those moments. At least I've been drunk like that, silly like that, and gotten in trouble. But, that's what we got to do is change is always good to a more positive thing. And we ain't hating on that on anybody. All right, we're just showing there's a real background to these people. They're real people, have real backgrounds and origins. Officer John Carlson of the 1st Precinct put him in an overnight tank. After booking him for public drunkenness, he was convicted and sentenced the next morning, but the sentence was suspended. He swore off drinking after his encounter with the criminal justice system and changed the spelling of his name to accompany his new resolve, calling himself Elijah Poole. Despite his best efforts by autumn, his memory of the arrest had faded, and though he tried to hide his addiction from his children, alcohol is a master who drowns the shame of his servants. Elijah's reddened eyes, slurred speech, and malodorous belching betrayed him. His unpredictable behavior frightened Clara and the children. They lived their lives in fear of his explosive temper when he was in the house and worried about his accidental death when he was out. I had become such a drunk that my own wife was ashamed of me, he remembered. As it happened, their fears were well founded. During the Christmas holidays of 1926, Elijah got so drunk that he passed out on the railroad tracks a few yards from his house. Luckily, a neighbor had seen him reeling and alerted Clara, who ran outside to search for him with 5-year-old Emmanuel. She spotted him sprawled on the tracks, and she and Emmanuel dragged him to safety and then carried him home. Although Elijah only weighed 135 pounds, he might as well have weighed a ton, since Clara tipped the scale at 100 pounds. Repentant, Elijah again promised to quit drinking and to give Clara back the proud man she had married. As part of his spiritual quest, he attended meetings of a local temple that called his religion Islam. Listen to this. Listen to this part, guys. Wake up. And whose members were called Muslims, in parentheses, right? The founder of the temple, he learned during his first visit, was a strangely dressed man by the name of Noble Drew Ali, all right? You see all the connections. Elijah, he was a Garveyite, and then he ended up under Drew Ali. Listen, according to the temple's teachings, Drew Ali was the seal of God's prophets. Despite the word of the Holy Quran, the book that Orthodox Muslims accept as the direct word of Allah, as did Muhammad of the 7th century, Drew Ali produced a holy book. This one called the Holy Quran of the Moorish Science Temple of America, all right? And we've shown a lot of it. There's a lot of Jesus in that book, and a lot of the same literally plagiarized writings of the Aquarian Age of Jesus by Levi Dowling, I believe, the author. We went over that. A lot of people actually compared the two writings, very almost exact, a lot of it, on the Jesus part. And then, we showed how he was saying, the Moors are the ancient Moabites who got kicked out of the land, Canaan, by Joshua. That's all in that book that he's talking about, right? Just for reference. In connection with that organization. So, they're talking about his holy book, the Holy Quran, or the Circle 7, right, of the Moorish Science Temple, in connection with that organization, which he founded in Newark in 1913. So we actually, did the research when they're saying he founded in Newark. It was actually Suleiman. He was under, and I believe Ward and Fard was under them too, eventually when they had moved to Chicago. But we'll get to that. But either way, it was actually funded by somebody else, and Drew Ali took, and we got videos on that. Go ahead and check it out. The frontispiece of the Holy Quran proclaimed that the book was divinely prepared by the Prophet Noble Drew Ali by the guiding of his father, God Allah. Drew Ali believed that Morocco was the original land of African Americans. Morocco over there in North Africa. He wasn't talking about Morocco in America. He literally was saying that land over there in North Africa, in the Mediterranean, right? He said that's where the Moors ended up after they got kicked out of the Canaan, or the Holy Land, the true Holy Land by Joshua. They ended up in Morocco, Tripoli, Mauritania, after they had permission from the Pharaoh. They had to ask permission from the Pharaoh. So again, we got Marcus Garvey saying, "Nah, you're from Africa." Now we got Drew Ali saying, "No, you're from North Africa, Morocco," whom he called Moors and Asiatics. According to Drew Ali, he had been divinely inspired to go to Africa in the early 1900s. He went to Egypt. I say after visiting Egypt, where he met and he got initiated. Remember the whole story, all the info we've done on Drew Ali. He was into the same order that they just mentioned earlier, the ancient mystic order. So after visiting Egypt, Drew Ali, he went to Morocco. So after he was initiated, got into the order of the ancient mystic, the same one that Elijah was talking about. He went to Morocco, whose people are said to be descendants of Bilal ibn Rabah, the African slave converted to Islam by the Prophet Muhammad, who was himself a Bedouin. While there, Drew Ali said he converted to Islam in Morocco, then under Spanish rule. For reasons that are unclear, he asked the king for permission to propagate Islam in America. Why would he? You guys see that? For reasons that are unclear, he asked for permission, talking about the king of Morocco, who was under the Spanish rule, to propagate Islam in America. Or, hey, you got your orders, which was readily granted. Here you go. That's the plan. That's the mission. Upon returning to America, he met with President Theodore Roosevelt to apprise him of his meeting in Morocco and of his plans to convert African Americans to Islam. Now he's meeting with a president. He's a well-connected man. He assured the president, however, that Muslims would remain loyal to the American government. Roosevelt, okay, so hold up. Remain loyal. A treaty, we remain loyal, accomplice to the American government. Remain loyal. Why? If it was a hijack. Roosevelt, he said, laughed at him because he felt his mission was foolhardy and doomed to fail. But how did he just go from just coming from random person going, he's just meeting with the president, right? And then he's meeting with the king of Morocco to go do what he did to create this movement, right? Just something for you to think about. Go ahead, Roosevelt Roosevelt is supposed to have replied, getting Negroes to accept Islam will be about as easy as getting horses to wear pants. He was talking shit to him, but hey, it wasn't that hard, huh? The story, like nearly everything else about Noble Drew Ali, was fanciful. Huh. There is no record at all of his meeting with President Roosevelt or any Moroccan dignitary, so this is what the Moors are saying. Nor is there any evidence that he ever left the United States. What immigration records do reveal, however, is that thousands of Muslims from Asia arrived in America in the midst of the Black Cultural Revolution, bringing with them Islam and other Eastern religions, whose appeal to urban blacks was immediate. So we learned that researching W. Wallace Fard, right? Uh, Wallace Muhammad. And just want to say, we do have records. We have Drew Ali in the Navy, literally going over to Egypt or in the army, whatever, in the military. We have records of Drew Ali that he did go out the country. Just to remind you guys. Among the immigrants was an East Indian missionary who came to the West to proclaim that the Mahdi, or Messiah, had returned to earth. The Mahdi, just like Wallace, right? He's the Mahdi too. Everybody's the chosen one. Everybody's the Messiah. The missionary said, had come in the person of Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmed of Qadian, India. All right? So here comes another guy, right? He's also a Messiah, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam from India. Hazrat Ahmed was a highly respected Muslim mystic and scholar who in 1889, these are people with high degrees of ancient Freemasonry, announced in India that he was the Messiah prophesied both in the Holy Bible and the Holy Quran. Ahmed had written a book, Barahin Ahmadiyya, which laid the foundation for the Ahmadiyya movement in Islam, or the Ahmadiyya community. His theology, like that of the Persian mystic Sayyid Ali Muhammad, these are names we're going to keep coming across, founder of the Baha'i faith in 1844, was considered heretical by Orthodox Muslims. Sayyid Muhammad had also proclaimed himself the Mahdi. He's also the Messiah. Ahmed's followers in India, like those of the Bab, as Sayyid Muhammad is called by his adherents in Persia, were mercilessly persecuted by Orthodox Muslims. Thousands were murdered, others were disfigured for life after being tortured. Ahmed died in 1908. After his death, his followers selected disciples or missionaries to travel throughout the world to spread the gospel of the man they worshipped as the reincarnation of Christ. You see that? It's always this Christ figure or Messiah figure creating a movement. One of his missionaries, Mufti Muhammad Sadiq, arrived at Ellis Island. Around 1910, he came with Ellis Island, so-called Wait, and settling in New York City. Opened a small mosque. He brought hundreds of East Indians and Arabs into the Ahmadiyya community, and soon expanded his ministry to other large cities where there were high concentrations of immigrants from the East. Listen, notably Newark. They started the Canaanite Temple, right? More signs. Dearborn and Chicago, right? Chicago and Detroit. Sadiq was able to attract small numbers of African Americans to the Ahmadiyya movement, mainly because they looked favorably upon any alternative to Christianity, which they felt had failed them. Among the African Americans Sadiq converted was a New Jersey Railway. Listen, the whole background and history, the whole thing we haven't even gone over. This guy from the Ahmadiyya movement, high degree mystical Shriners, mystic order Freemasons. Sadiq converted somebody in New Jersey Railway expressman named Timothy Drew, and that was his real name. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Thomas Drew, Timothy Drew, who studied Islam, talking about Noble Drew Ali. Under him for about a year. He was under him for about a year. Remember, he also knew Jamal Afghani, who literally initiated him. So then this other guy, Sadiq, he was under him. Listen, this is what they don't want you to know. So-called Moors do not want you to know because he's supposed to be the all, and that's it. Nobody before him, nobody teaching him. He's the ultimate, right? Like everybody else who goes over, religious followings like that, figures. So he studied under him for about a year between 1912 and 1913. Drew quickly became disaffected with the Ahmadiyya community, though, finding that it did not offer him the spiritual and psychological fulfillment he needed, so he separated from him. But he was under him for a year. In 1913, Drew, greatly influenced by the writings of white spiritualists, listen, this is what I was saying earlier, you thought I was making this up. Influenced by the writings of a white spiritualist, Levi H. Dowling, author of the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus Christ. All right, got a whole video on this. Make sure you're caught up in all the videos. He formed his own sect, calling it the Canaanite Temple. But he was actually in that temple with Suleiman. Suleiman was the one founding it, and he was right under Suleiman. He was right his wingman, right? Like he was there, his partner. And the Canaanite Temple. I got a video on that too. But listen to what they're telling you, what I was saying earlier. A lot of the stuff in the Circle 7 Quran has plagiarized word for word all these full chapters of Jesus that came from the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ from Levi H. Dowling. Go compare it yourself so you can see when I'm just making this up. I showed that in my video. Formed his own sect. So after that, that's when, the whole Moorish science comes up. After Dowling died in 1911, Drew plagiarized the book. Come on now. This is a black man saying this, right? Carl Evans, that's the author of this book. Again, The Messenger, The Rise and Fall of Elijah Muhammad. Again, Drew plagiarized the book, talking about the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus Christ. What does Jesus have to do with the ancient Moabites and all that stuff? What's Christianity have to do if he's supposed to be Islam? Combined it with the teachings of the Ahmadiyya movement. Listen, then he combined that with the Ahmadiyya movement teachings and material from Freemasonry to produce his so-called Holy Quran. All right? Yeah. He changed his name to Drew Ali, preceded by the title of Noble, which he borrowed from a Masonic ritual. Okay? Wake up, Black Americans, Noble Drew Ali wrote, were actually Asiatics. You guys ain't from here. You're Asiatics. You're from Morocco. You descended from the Moabites. All right? Noble Drew Ali told Black Americans, I'm going to highlight that for you. If you think I'm just making this up, whoop. Because Black Americans, Noble Drew Ali wrote, were actually Asiatics who descended from Moabites. So all you guys are Moabites. That's what I've been trying to tell you. That's all I was trying to point out. That's all I was pointing out in my old videos about, Noble Drew Ali and just the history, not about the good things that he might have helped out people with in their spiritual path to get out of drugs or get out of being criminals or whatever bad situation they were in, like Elijah, right? Besides his Holy Quran, Drew Ali gave his followers several manuals containing questions and answers that had to be memorized. One pamphlet posed the following. Listen, just like W.D. Fard, Wallace Fard did a pamphlet that people had to memorize too. Same thing. So Noble Drew Ali's questionnaire 5 says, who is Noble Drew Ali? Answer, he is Allah's prophet. You got to memorize that. Question number 28, why did Allah send Jesus to this earth? Answer, to save the Israelites from the iron hand of oppression of the pale-skinned nations of Europe, who were governing a portion of Palestine at that time. Yet this is like, a test. You got to know this stuff. Question 57, who were Adam and Eve? Answer, they are the mother and father of the human family, Asiatics and Muslims. Question 58, where did they go? Answer, they went into Asia. What Asia? America, Asia, or the other one? Question 59, what is the modern name given to their children? Answer, Asiatics. Question 81, what is the name of the person into whom Jesus was first reincarnated? Answer, Prophet Muhammad, the Conqueror. All right, so now he's him because he's the Mahdi now. Noble Drew Ali's combination of black nationalism like Garveyite stuff, and religion proved as popular as Garveyism. And within 10 years, there were chapters of the Moorish Science Temple of America, the MSTA, in cities in the Northeast and Midwest. By 1928, Drew Ali had established 17 temples in 15 states, the one in Chicago being the largest and most profitable. From his office there, he manufactured oils and herbal remedies. He was a shaman, right? He was literally, for reals, going, like a salesman. And also, he traveled with a circus for some time too, guys, if you didn't know this whole background. So, by 1928, though, he had established 17 temples. He manufactured oils and herbal remedies for countless ailments, among which were Old Moorish healing oil, Moorish purifier bath compound, and Moorish herb tea for human ailments. That money bag. While he had never personally seen or heard Marcus Garvey deliver a speech, Elijah did attend a lecture given by Drew Ali in Detroit and was profoundly impressed. All right, listen. He was soon among the thousands of blacks who joined the Moors. Elijah was a Moor. Because of their odd dress, employers had no problem singling the Moors out for discrimination. The maroon fezzes, which men were required to wear at all times, and goatees were a dead giveaway. As Moors held themselves superior to white people, their religious beliefs frequently resulted in hostile encounters on the streets and in the workplace. Things reached a point where Noble Drew Ali felt compelled to issue an edict warning members to stop assaulting whites and to avoid incendiary speeches on the job. In 1928, Elijah was working as a forge helper at the Chevrolet Motors plant in Detroit. While the pay was good, the forge job was one of the most dangerous and physically debilitating in the plant. The heat alone was suffocating, and the helpers often went home sick, many of them coughing up black mucus for hours after the shift because they constantly inhaled vapors from red-hot metal. Elijah stayed on the job for as long as he could, but quit after several months, complaining of breathing difficulties and persistent asthma attacks. He returned to working odd jobs, but devoted most of his time to spreading Islam, at least as the MSTA, or the Moorish Science Temple of America, understood it. As he moved up through the ranks, listen, I'm talking about Elijah, moving up the ranks in the MSTA with the Moorish Science of organization, he was given several names in short succession. So he had Muhammad he was also Elim Muhammad, and finally Muhammad Fanu Bey. For the first time in his life, Elijah was moving in the same social circles as the black middle class. Many officers of the Moorish Science Temple of America were college-educated professionals. Others were pillars of their communities, college-educated professionals, because they earned good wages working for wealthy whites. One high-profile member of the Chicago Temple was Aaron Payne, a former assistant state prosecutor. Still another was Butler, to a generous Chicago multimillionaire. At election time, some candidates paid tribute to Drew Ali. Listen to this, guys. Listen. Again, at election time, we just had elections, right? We had celebrities endorsing certain candidates, right? Listen to this. At election time, some candidates paid tribute to Drew Ali, particularly in Chicago, where his endorsements guaranteed thousands of votes. All right, he made his people, hey guys, vote for this guy. He's for us, because they were paying him, pay tributes to Drew Ali, paying him for votes for the black vote. Among them was Oscar S. the Priest, a popular city alderman representing Chicago's South Side. With Drew Ali's help, the Priest was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 1928, the first African American from a northern state to make it to Congress. Drew Ali's success in sending the Priest to Washington aroused envy within his inner circle. Chief among his detractors was Cheek Claude Green, the butler in the mansion of philanthropist Julius Rosenwald. Rosenwald was highly regarded by African Americans, particularly in Chicago, where he was one of the most generous benefactors, okay? He had given millions of dollars to black colleges, was on the board of trustees of Tuskegee Institute, and had financed construction of the first YMCA in Chicago's black community. Apparently unaware of Green's membership in the Moorish Science Temple of America, Rosenwald purchased a building at 3640 Indiana Avenue on his butler's behalf. The building, named Unity Hall, immediately became the cult's main mosque and national headquarters, and in 1928 was the site of the first Moorish Science Temple of America annual convention. You guys hear this? So he's saying he didn't know his butler was in the Moorish Science Temple, but he got him a building where the Moorish Science of America, literally built their main mosque, right? A donation from Julius Rosenwald. Julius Rosenwald, huh? Julius Rosenwald. Just general knowledge here in Wikipedia, right? This is what he looked like. You guys see who's funding all these black colleges and literally black movements? We saw him donate a building where the Moorish Science Temple had their main mosque, right? It says Julius Rosenwald was an American businessman and philanthropist. He is best known as a part owner and leader of Sears, Roebuck and Company, and for establishing the Rosenwald Fund, which donated millions in matching funds to promote vocational or technical education. In 1919, he was appointed to the Chicago Commission on Race Relations. He was also the principal founder and backer for the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, to which he gave more than $5 million and served as president from 1927 to 1932. So Julius Rosenwald was born in 1862 to the clothier Samuel Rosenwald and his wife Augusta Hammerslau, a Chazar, a Jewish immigrant couple. Rosenwald, who literally donated the building so the Moorish Science Temple of America could have their main mosque. Let's go back. So, all right. Rosenwald purchased a building at 3640 Indiana Avenue on his butler's behalf. Why would he do that? Just for his butler. But he didn't know he was a member. He didn't know what his butler was going to do with the building. The building, named Unity Hall, immediately became the cult's main mosque and national headquarters, and in 1928 was the site of the first Moorish Science Temple annual convention. By early 1929, Unity Hall was the center of Drew Lee's own multi-million-dollar empire. Okay? That this guy donated to them, so gave it to his butler, who was an actual member of the Moorish Science Temple, who literally gave it to Drew Lee. And what is he? His parents were what? Jewish Chazars, couple from Germany. Julius Rosenwald was Samuel Augustus' second child to survive infancy. All right? Chazar funded the building and literally part of the movement. This guy right here. See, I can't make this stuff up. You want to sugarcoat it and you want to pretend you're not seeing what I'm trying to show you here. Read between the lines, but it's okay. Let's just keep reading for those who get it. I know a lot of you get what I'm showing you here, right? So Unity Hall, that was donated by Rosenwald to the Moorish Science Temple. Female members paid dues of $1 a month, while men paid $2. Temple records showed national membership peaked at 15,000. Drew Lee made a profit of between 15,000 and 18,000 a month from his various temples and businesses. So about that money bag, which afforded him a lavish lifestyle, one that Green and other high-level temple businessmen began to question. The questions evolved into hostilities. Green accused Drew Lee of wasting Moorish Science Temple of America revenues on himself and a succession of women. Drew Lee married whomever he wanted, sometimes living with 2 or more women at the same time, wisely paying for separate homes for each. When he grew tired of one wife, he would quietly divorce her and marry another. One woman he married was the apple of Green's eye, and when she moved in with Drew Lee, the cruel fates moved in with them. Green made it clear to Drew Ali that he wasn't motivated by jealousy alone unless he received a larger piece of the Moorish Science Temple of America's economic pie. Green said that he would publicly denounce Drew Ali as a gentleman of leisure and expose how he squandered the cult's wealth. Since the bookkeeping's records were kept inside a safe in Green's office, he clearly could carry out his threats. Drew Ali, perhaps too enamored of his own ego to sense impending scandal, rebuffed Green's demand. On March 11, 1929, Green dumped the contents of Drew Ali's offices in the Unity Hall on the sidewalk. 3 nights later, several of Drew Ali's enforcers attacked Green at the headquarters as he was locking up. Guys, hear that? He got revenge on him, shooting him once and stabbing him several times. Literally tried to kill him. The body to be discovered by a janitor the next morning. Drew Ali, who had been out of town on the night of the murder, was arrested upon his return and charged as an accessory to homicide. Police alleged that he, his wife, and a group of Moors were celebrating Green's death at the time of his arrest. Drew Ali hired Payne and William Dawson L. to represent him. A grand jury handed up an indictment after a hearing on May 20th, 1929. While Drew Ali was out on bail, a man by the name of David Ford, listen, pay attention, this gets deeper and deeper. While Drew Ali was out on bail, a man named David Ford joined the Moorish Science Temple of America. Ford, who also went by Ford, Wallace, Dodd, Ford, or Fard. All right, who's this David Ford that joined the Moorish Science Temple of America in Chicago while Drew Ali was out on bail? It seemed that he was a godsend. With the trial pending and his followers abandoning the Moorish Science Temple of America in droves, Drew Ali desperately needed someone capable of overseeing his organization. Ford, who seemed to fit the bill, all of a sudden, yeah, he fits the bill. Let's pick him, right? Like the mystery man, right? Wallace Ford was renamed David Ford L. and promoted to Sheik. He rose rapidly to Grand Sheik and was put in charge of the Chicago Temple. Listen, this is W.D. Fard's a little bit of background before he became the Mahdi or the Messiah of the Nation of Islam, right? The chosen one. So he was actually Grand Sheik of the Moorish Science Temple in Chicago. Less than a month after naming David Ford L. acting head of the Chicago Mosque, Drew Ali died. Rumor had it that he died of injuries inflicted by the police while in custody for Green's murder or from a beating by Moorish Science Temple of America members, listen, as retribution for Green's death. You guys hear this? But it seems he got, beaten to death. That's messed up, Other Moorish Science Temple of America members, including Hamid Anderson L. of Newark, claimed that he died because of poor health. He was gravely ill in the weeks preceding his death. Anderson L. recalled, in any event, Drew Ali was found dead in his home on July 20th, 1929. Black newspapers attributed his death to tuberculosis, a verdict never accepted by most Moors. All right, so either he was sick or he got beaten, I don't really know, but he died early in his life. He wasn't ready, it was all of a sudden. Something seemed to have happened. Arguments erupted over the issue of a successor. David Ford L. claimed Drew Ali had left him in charge and declared himself, listen, the reincarnation of noble Drew Ali. David Ford L. was saying that. Who's this David Ford L.? On July 29th, he was telling people that. And I know a lot of you know the story. It's talking about I'm the reincarnation of noble Drew Ali. Like I know a lot of you know what this story about Wallace D. Fard. He was saying that. Those who had been loyal to Green, on the other hand, argued that David Ford L. had not been with the Moorish Science Temple of America long enough to succeed Drew Ali, and insisted that Charles Kirkman Bey, one of Green's closest allies, had the authority by virtue of his seniority to assume the mantle of leadership. Still another faction, headed by Ira Johnson Bey, claimed that Kirkman Bey was unfit to sit on the Supreme Prophet's throne. In September, the arguments degenerated into a war between the factions. On the morning of September 25th, four of Johnson Bey's lieutenants went to Kirkman Bey's Elm Street home and kidnapped him. They did not harm Kirkman Bey's wife, Hesse, but threatened to kill her if she called the police. Nonetheless, the minute the abductors left, Hesse summoned the police and led them to Unity Hall, where two of her husband's kidnappers were interrogated. They admitted that Kirkman Bey was being held at the home of Ira Johnson Bey. Chicago Police Sergeant John O'Toole called for backup en route to the Johnson Bey home. By noon, over 1,000 policemen had the place surrounded. A gunfight broke out when Johnson Bey refused to release Kirkman Bey. By the time it was over, 2 police officers and 1 cult member were dead. And 2 other police officers and a cult member were seriously injured. When Johnson Bey finally surrendered, 60 Moorish Science Temple of America members were taken into custody. Johnson Bey was charged with murdering a police officer. On September 29, he and William Johnson L. were charged with Claude Green's murder. The deployment of 1,000 police officers in a single block of the black community evoked outrage. The fact that it all started with the kidnapping of Kirkman Bey got lost in the flood of rumors of police brutality and conspiracy theories about police plans to kill every member of the Moorish Science Temple of America. As retribution for what he called the unjust attack on the Moorish Science Temple of America, Ford L. Wallace Fard swore that he would bring America to its knees in the very near future. He had a plan. On October 29th, 1 month to the day of the indictment, the stock market crashed, and Ford L. said that the crash proved he was the reincarnation of Noble Drew Ali. Ford, huh? Listen to this, guys. You ready? This is going to relate to the other research we're doing on W.D. Fard, which we're not done with. It says, while the crash caused panic in America in general, it induced a state of euphoria among those who believed that Ford L. really was what he claimed to be. Thousands of Drew Ali's followers swore allegiance to him. But the more educated members of the Moorish Science Temple of America rejected his prophecy as coincidence and decided to stay under Kirkman Bey's leadership. So listen, remember, so he had it says thousands of Drew Ali's followers eventually followed him, right? Ford, remember that Elijah was there too. He might have followed him. That's where he began following him. It says in November, Ford L. moved from Chicago. So he moved away from Chicago and headed for Detroit. Now remember what's going on in Detroit. At the same time, some guy is coming to find the lost tribes of Shabazz from Mecca. This is the same guy, guys. Listen, it says using the names of Wallace D. Fard. So this is the same Ford L. that was a Grand Sheik in the Temple of Chicago, Moorish Science of America, who brought thousands of followers with him. It says he changed his name. Now he goes by the names of Wallace D. Fard Muhammad, and the former Moor renamed the faction he controlled the Allah Temple of Islam. The former Moor, W.D. Fard, okay? The former Moor renamed the faction he controlled the Allah Temple of Islam, the ATI, okay? 2 weeks before Fard arrived in Paradise Valley on July 4th, 1930, the head of the Moorish temple there sailed to Turkey in search of a homeland for members tired of the factional disputes. Ali Muhammad Bey, whose given name was James Lomax, head of the Detroit temple who had joined with Green to topple Noble Drew Ali, thought that he would be in jeopardy if he remained in America. He arrived in Constantinople on May 24th, where he hoped to gain an audience with President Mustafa Kemal Pasha, whom he regarded as a fellow Muslim. What he found instead was red tape about diplomatic protocol, and he cooled his heels in Turkey for more than a month before his presence was even brought to Pasha's attention. On June 29th, he delivered a petition to the Turkish president in which he requested permission in the name of 28,000 Muslim Negroes suffering from racial prejudice in America to found a colony in Anatolia. Angora, or any other underpopulated farming area. Although President Pasha was cordial, he denied the request. By the time Lomax returned from Turkey in July, Elijah and thousands of Moors, listen, Elijah and thousands of Moors had left the Moorish Science Temple of America. America was in the throes of the Great Depression, and like millions of others who find solace in alcohol, Elijah started drinking again, this time more heavily than ever. Rather than being Clara's partner, he became another dependent to keep body and soul together. Clara worked in several places as a domestic, while 9-year-old Emmanuel went up and down alleys with my little wagon, in parentheses, to collect cardboard, milk bottles, brass, copper, and anything else he could sell at the junkyard. He also climbed into the trash bins behind grocery stores, searching for anything remotely edible. Despite their efforts to avoid the shame of public assistance, Elijah and Clara took turns standing in the welfare line as the nation's economy skidded rapidly downhill. While frantic whites reportedly jumped from windows on Wall Street, Elijah hushed his fears with bootleg liquor. To worsen matters, Clara gave birth to 2 more children during the Depression. Herbert was born on April 16, 1929, and Elijah Jr. on June 29, 1931. When Fard first arrived in Paradise Valley, Fard, he attracted little attention, starting by using fine silks as a come on, all right? Remember, he was peddling clothes, he was selling clothes, fine silks. He made his way into people's homes. That's how he got inside people's homes. That's how he got trust. A gifted salesman, he would lace his sales pitch with talk of the advantages of his dietary habits and religious beliefs. As soon as his customers noticed an improvement in their health after following his dietary guidelines for a few weeks, Fard soon acquired a reputation as a healer and miracle worker. Within 2 months of his arrival, people were crowding into basements to hear him preach about Islam and how it could improve their lives. The Messiah had returned, he said, but few people realized it because he wasn't espousing Christianity anymore. Rather, he was gathering his people under the wings of a religion called Islam. Listen, it's another Messiah. While some were drawn to Fard, others saw him as another false prophet in what was a growing cottage industry. The number of people, mainly men, claiming a divine kinship had multiplied. This is what I was just saying. A lot of messiahs all over the place. It's a business, big business, this divine kinship claims, right? So claiming a divine kinship had multiplied to such a degree that it was difficult to distinguish one prophet from another. Around 1925, for example, another group whose members regarded themselves not only as Moors, but as Jews, as well as established in Harlem. All right, this is where you get your Hebrew Israelite camps. Members of the cult, which called the Zionist Temple of Moorish Jews, studied Hebrew and used the Torah and the Talmud and as their religious guides. However, unlike the Moorish Science Temple of America and cult was confined to New York, and its membership never rose above a few hundred. Nor was Noble Drew Ali the only African American professing to be God's last messenger. Listen to this. Perhaps the best known was Father Divine, born of the Gula tribe of blacks on Hutchinson's Island, right? From the Gula tribe, but he's in the north coast of North Carolina. Divine was a maverick Baptist preacher who moved to New York in the late 1920s and proclaimed himself the messenger and the Son of God. Like Fard, initially, just like Wallace Fard, initially Divine taught his tens of thousands of followers that blacks were superior to whites. Blacks were attracted to his cult, it seemed, as much by his religious teachings as by the free food, clothing, and shelter he offered. Free food, clothing, and shelter. Divine renounced his black superiority claims during the Depression when he realized that he could attract white people, right? Oh, no, it's not about black superiority. Now he saw money being able to make too with the white folks. So he could attract white people to his churches as well as blacks. In fact, he eventually married a white woman whom he renamed Mother Mary. Charles Manuel, or Sweet Daddy Grace, is another one. was another young black man who rose to prominence as the messenger of God. In the early 1930s, Grace, who claimed at times to be God in person, took credit for ending the Italo-Ethiopian War in 1936 after his disciples prayed for a month for the war's cessation. By 1934, he had established some 85 chapters of the House of God along the eastern seaboard. It was during the ebb in Elijah's life that began with the Great Depression that his wife first heard about the silk peddler, who was offering salvation to his lost uncle in the wilderness of North America. A phrase Fard used to describe the African American, right? The wilderness of North America, his lost uncle. Elijah was usually either too inebriated or too ill, owing to a chronic asthmatic condition, to attend meetings sponsored by the mysterious traveler. So Clara went without him. Listen to this. After a particularly inspiring sermon, Clara concluded that the stranger was what he said he was, a prophet. She rushed home to tell Elijah about him and the incredible message he had delivered that evening. Now remember, he's coming from the Moorish Science Temple. He's a Grand Sheik there in Chicago. But Elijah was too ill to think of anything but his own health. Since Elijah wouldn't go to meet the prophet, Clara decided to bring the prophet to meet Elijah. All right. And that's the end of chapter 3, guys. And we're going to read the other chapters, maybe and possibly in the W.D. Fard series I got going, because it's going to start talking about how when he met Fard, right? We're going to read that chapter as well. So again, this was the book, The Messenger, The Rise and Fall of Elijah Muhammad. All right, we got other images of this book. You can Google it. You'll see Elijah Muhammad right on the cover. This is by Carl Evans again. I hope you enjoyed this very thorough background, more than what people know of most people. They don't know anything about the people, where they're from, when it happened, a lot of the context and background behind them before they became leaders. It's things you got to know, really. You can't just follow people blindly. But we're going to go ahead and continue, guys, with another book. We're not done yet. I hope you enjoyed that chapter, though, in this book. Thanks for reading it, the whole chapter with me. We're going to continue today to another book. All right. So don't go anywhere. We got one more book to read. This should be a quick read, a very interesting read. We're going to get it like it's the first time. Okay. Okay. So we're going to move on to this book. We're going to get it again like it's the first time. Back in the book, The Craft and The Crescent. Let's hear Freemasonry and the Black Muslim Movement in America by Michael S. Schneiderer. And we start out in the introduction. It says this paper sets out to show the influence of Freemasonry in the Nation of Islam, NOI, and the groups leading up to the NOI's formation and those who rose out of it. These groups were created out of necessity because of the unfavorable social atmosphere towards African Americans in the United States at the beginning of the 20th century. The groups that led up to the Nation of Islam were the United Negro Improvement Association, led by Marcus Garvey, and the Moorish Science Temple, founded by Noble Drew Ali. That's what led up to the Nation of Islam. Listen, I will touch on each of these groups and show their relation to the Nation of Islam and the influence that these two groups had on W.D. Fard and Elijah Muhammad. These two groups had influence on who? Fard and Elijah Muhammad, the two men who are responsible for the creation and development of the NOI theology. Many books have been written about each of the groups listed above, so I will not go into a great deal of their general history. I have listed a selected reading page for further study. The Order of Freemasonry is the grandfather of all fraternal organizations and has had some impact on each generation. Freemasonry has been segregated for most of its history in the United States, yet its impact on both black and white societies cannot be disputed. Many leaders of both races have been members of this organization, and the teachings of Freemasonry show in their actions. Freemasonry had filled a need in the two cultures of both black and white. African Americans have transformed Freemasonry into a social and religious sect that continues to be a driving force in society today. Okay, so go on to this first chapter of this. It's going to talk about Marcus Garvey, it says here, and the United Negro Improvement Association. Marcus Garvey, right? Some images of him. Marcus Garvey started the United Negro Improvement Association, the UNIA, in 1914 in Jamaica. Its international headquarters moved to Harlem, New York in 1919. At this time, they claimed a membership of 2,000. The purpose of this organization was to unite the black people, and they did this by teaching the black man and woman to be independent of white society. Mr. Garvey wanted the black race to be financially independent of white man. He encouraged parents to give their children black dolls and told his followers to worship a black Jesus within the African Orthodox Church. All right. So as long as it was black, he didn't care if you still did, had idols or followed Christianity or religions. Marcus Garvey was a member of Prince Hall Freemasonry. He was a Prince Hall. Remember, that's the black Freemasons started in Massachusetts by Prince Hall. Prince Hall Freemason. That's who Marcus Garvey was. That's why he dressed like that, like a Knights of Malta. Okay? Mary Lefkowitz states, to a large extent, the UNIA was organized along Masonic lines. It had a significant benevolent function. It had a constitution based on the Masons. It also had a potentate, and a potentate's helmet closely resembled the ceremonial hat worn by Masons in special parades, okay? This is what I was telling you about his dress earlier. Note the picture above has Marcus Garvey in a similar uniform to that of a Knights Templar of the Masonic Order, all right? A Knights Templar of the Masonic Order. I told you that's what he's dressed as, right? I told you that. Many African Americans, Freemasons at the time, believed that Freemasonry actually started in the advanced civilization of ancient Egypt. This helped African Americans identify with Freemasonry, as it was thought to be based on ceremonies in ancient Africa. Dodge the hijack. We showed a lot of good information about those same concepts and symbols and all that here in ancient America. And ancient Egypt, the true ancient Egypt, was here in the Americas. So yeah, one of the UNIA's main doctrines was that the black man should leave America and return to their homeland of Africa. Dodge the hijack, see, trying to get you to Africa. This Knights Templar Mason, this Prince Hall Mason. Yeah, Marcus, Prince Hall trying to get you to go to Africa. All right, chapter 2 says here, Noble Drew Ali and the Moorish Science Temple of America. Says here, a man named Timothy Drew founded the Moorish Science Temple in 1913. He was born in North Carolina, and in my video of his origin, you guys see he might have a different origin, Virginia. I forget what state, but it's different with same birth date and everything. We got the records. It says he converted to Islam after a visit to Saudi Arabia. Marcus Garvey and his group heavily influenced Drew and Marcus Garvey heavily influenced Drew, and after Garvey was deported in 1927, many of his followers joined Drew's organization. Many of Garveyites became Moorish Science Temple followers. And we got that in a whole other book too, when we did the Drew Ali videos. He took the name Noble Drew Ali and proclaimed himself as a prophet of Allah, God. He was a member of the ancient Egyptian nobles of the mystic shrine, listen, or commonly called the Black Shriners, just like Elijah. All right, the ancient Egyptian nobles of the mystic shrine. Freemason. The men in this Moorish Science Temple wore fezzes as part of their dress. They were also required to wear colored shorts with elastic just below the knee and uniforms of robes of purple or red, which resembled those worn by the Shriners. They were considered to be Asiatic or Moors, all right, instead of African American. Now, we're not just like West Africa. We're from North. We're Morocco. We're Asiatics. Another Mason telling you you're from somewhere else. He taught that the Moors were superior to the white race. Noble Drew Ali stated that Jesus, according to the temple teaching, as a black man tried to redeem the black Moabites, Jesus, only to be executed by the white Romans. These were the white Romans? Were they really white? In their meetings, they would practice rites that were not to be spoken of outside of the order. They had their own marriage ceremonies that consisted of 30 members and were conducted by the divine minister. If they were to quit the order, they would be required to commit suicide according to the oath taken upon joining. Listen, outside of their meetings would be placed a guard who would push a button that would turn on a light at the podium. This let the speaker know if some unwanted guests were coming, and so that they could change their tone of speaking. They had different colored lights for different occasions, depending on whether or not they thought the visitor to be a government informer. Some of the titles of their officers are as follows. Grand Sheik, right? Remember David D. Fard was the Grand Sheik in the Moorish Science Temple before he went and hooked up with Elijah and created the Nation of Islam. Yeah, in Chicago, he was the Grand Sheik there. National Counselor, Lieutenant Governor, Sheik, Minister Assistant, Grand Sheik, Divine Minister, Supreme Grand Advisor, Supreme Grand Governor. They would carry membership cards with them at all times, which consisted of the following, all right? Remember, this is from old videos we got. This is your nationality. This is what Drew Ali was, and the people were carrying their ID. There's message right here. It says, this is your nationality and identification card for the Moorish Science Temple of America and birthrights for the Moorish Americans. We honor all the divine prophets, Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, and Confucius, all the divine idols. May the blessings of God of our Father Allah be upon you that carry this card. I do hereby declare that you are a Muslim under the laws of the Holy Quran of Mecca. Love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. I am a citizen of the USA. Mecca, just like the Nation of Islam, right? Noble Drew Ali, the Prophet, 1104 Sedgwick Street, Chicago. All right, that's what was written on your ID card. We honor Jesus. They were required to learn an examination of question and answers to be part of the organization. This was taken from the examination portion of Freemasonry. Just copying what they did in Freemasonry. Noble Drew Ali also wrote the Quran as revealed to him by Allah, containing the Moorish view of creation to the end of time and the fulfilling of prophecies. Ali's Quran focused on the history of the black man and his evolution to its current state. This Quran in no way resembles the Holy Quran used by the practicing Muslims. After death of Ali, John Givens L. claimed to be the new prophet and continued the organization. It is still in existence today, mainly in major cities. There have been several offshoots, mainly because of power struggles within the organization. All right. Now we go on to chapter 3 of this book, and this is about Wallace D. Fard and the Nation of Islam, or as he was known in the Moorish Science Temple as David Fard L. Wallace D. Fard and his many names, right? The Nation of Islam was started after the death of Noble Drew Ali and the exile of Marcus Garvey. There was a need to fill the void in the black nationalist movement. The founder of the order was named Wallace D. Fard. Many authors have claimed that he was a member of the Moorish Science Temple of America. And in some of the records of the MST, the name W.D. Fard is found. But in the book History of the Nation of Islam by Elijah Muhammad, he states that Fard was no follower of Noble Drew Ali. Of course, he couldn't state that because he's saying that is God. How could God follow anybody? Nevertheless, the similarities of the two groups, including their theology, cannot be disputed. Since many of the new members of the NOI were from the other two groups, there can be no doubt of their influence of the order. It is also stated that Fard was influenced by the Jehovah's Witnesses. All right, we're going to get into that when we get back into the series. He was influenced by the Jehovah's Witnesses. Listen, Fard, the Nation of Islam. He encouraged his followers to listen to broadcasts of the Reverend Rutherford. There were other names of the order, such as the Lost Foundation of Islam in the wilderness of North America. which was technically the first name of the order. Other names included Allah's Temple of Islam. Bradley Price Roderick, who wrote an online article titled A Brief Look at the Roots and Development of the Nation of Islam, states, few of Fard's doctrines originated in the Quran. He was heavily influenced by the teachings of Marcus Garvey and Noble Drew Ali. Those were his master teachers, huh? Some of the ideologies that he borrowed from Freemasonry, and incorporated into his new religion were as follows. New members were required to study, memorize, and recite material about the order, just like Drew Ali had his members recite, which he copied from Freemasonry, right? And they must pass the test to be able to advance in the order. The oral teachings were called the secret ritual of the Nation of Islam. In the 30s, shortly after the founding of the Nation of Islam, there was an incident in which a member of the order in Detroit participated in a holy sacrifice of a white man in his home. Apparently, there was a book of doctrine and ritual written by W.D. Fard that stated that if a member killed 3 white men, he would be promised a place in paradise. He claimed to be Allah in person. All right, we all know the story of W.D. Fard, right? And set up a theology that in no way conformed with mainstream Islam. I could go on into deep details of his religious teachings, cited in numerous writings, all right? But I would stray from the purpose of this paper, all right? And that's what we're going to do, and that's what we're doing in the W.D. Fard series we got going, okay? Fard's reign over the nation lasted only 3 years before he vanished, never to be heard from or seen again. The FBI tried for years under J. Edgar Hoover to locate the leader, but without success. Before he disappeared, he instructed and left in charge Elijah Poole, right? He left in charge Elijah Poole, who's also coming from the Moorish Science Temple, also was influenced by the United Negro Improvement Association of Marcus Garvey, all right? Also a Shriner and also Freemason. It says the Nation of Islam under the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Because Elijah Muhammad became the divine or driving force and spiritual leader of the NOI. After the disappearance of Fard, Elijah Muhammad himself had been a Freemason. He had been a Freemason. You don't stop being a Freemason, and a member of the ancient Egyptian nobles of the mystic shrine, just like Drew Ali, in the Detroit area, but later dropped his membership from both organizations. Throughout his career as the messenger of Allah for the NOI, many of his teachings and theology centered on Freemasonry. One of his speeches, entitled A True Mason, Mr. Muhammad seems to be unsure of how he really feels about Freemasonry. He states, never has any so-called American Negro been taught by white people to believe in Almighty God Allah and his true religion, Islam. Only in higher organizations, or we say Masonry, that's from his own words. He goes on to state, in the Masonics, there is a little teaching at the top mostly of this particular order that mentions the teachings of Almighty God, Allah. But you have to pay a lot of money to become a 33-degree Mason. You hear that? You have to have money. You can't just do it based on your connection. You got to have the money too. Therefore, you are an absolute victim, as Isaiah teaches you, that you buy that which does not bring you any gain. To buy that kind of teaching does not gain you the hereafter. From these two statements, one could conclude that Mr. Muhammad first believed that the only way to understand Islam is in the higher degrees of Masonry. Then he states that Masonry will not get you to the hereafter. Later in the talk, he states, a Mason cannot be a good Mason unless he knows the Holy Quran and follows its teachings. This book is the only book that will make a true Mason. The Bible will not make you a true one. So we are to assume that Freemasonry will teach the black man about Islam. The Holy Quran will make you a true Mason, but you are a victim and you will not receive any gain or life in the hereafter if you become one. The only reason for these statements, I believe, is that he would rather the black man spend his money supporting the Nation of Islam instead of Freemasonry, all right? Okay, you hear that? Elijah Muhammad also taught the following concerning Freemasonry. and the Nation of Islam. The three Ruffians in the third degree represent certain countries and are as follows: Jubelo, England; Jubula, France; and Jubelum, United States. He states that these countries enslaved the black man, but the United States killed him. Hiram Abiv, who represents the black man, was killed with a Seton maul, therefore making him mentally dead. He states, "You are the answer to it all. You are Hiram Abiv yourself." "Yes, sir, you are the one. You are the one that has been hit in the head, and it takes a long time for that head to heal. I say, my friend, you are the one that has been blindfolded on. You are the one that ought to be crying for light and more light, but you are not. You're reaching for the blindfold." He also taught that the East Gate represented Africa, the West Gate the West Indies, and the North was North America, which in turn makes it the place of darkness. The apron represents the covering that was given to the white man when he was forced out of Africa to hide his nakedness. This is what Elijah's telling people, right? The cable toe represents the chains that he had led out of Africa. See, that's why you got to dodge the hijack. Now you're saying that you all came as African slaves, and that's how you got to the Americas, you see? That's Pan-African stuff. Marcus Garvey stuff. Yeah. Moorish science, temple stuff. So Elijah Muhammad also taught that there were 360 degrees of knowledge, just like Malachi York, right? 360 degrees of the physical and 360 degrees of the spiritual, 720. That's what Malachi York says. Same thing Elijah Muhammad was saying, 360 degrees. This is Masonic talk, right? And the Masons only had 32 degrees of that knowledge. So the Masons were inferior because of their lack of knowledge. Elijah Muhammad, in his book, The Secrets of Freemasonry, that's the book I was talking about earlier, states, "Men of higher knowledge us the term light, or use the term light to describe knowledge not common to the common man." You got to get that light. You got to get that knowledge or wisdom, the degrees. Many of the founding fathers of this country were and still are high-degree Masons and Shriners. They have sworn oaths not to reveal what they call secrets. It just so happens that the secrets, in parentheses, they are bound by oaths to keep secret, just happen to be the truths to free you and I from our grave of ignorance. All right? That's quoted from Elijah Muhammad. He's saying that. He's spilling the beans on everybody. All right? The book also states the Honorable Elijah Muhammad pointed out that the first 3 degrees of Masonry were the answer to their slavery. But how many of them understood that and have demonstrated a significant work to prove it? The white man gave it to the blacks, but the applicable element were gutted out. See, that's the thing. He's saying white folks invented. That's a little hijack. Freemasonry. Mr. Muhammad also believes that Freemasonry and scripture allude to him. He was able to demonstrate works beyond what any man is known for. The symbolism is the scripture dealing with an architect being killed and his body being lost was a sign, the seal of which was broken by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Not only did he teach the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding on this matter, he also demonstrated the fulfillment of it. He told the world that it wasn't his knowledge, so rightly so. Judging by what the white legislature stated, he said he got it from Allah, God who had come, as the scripture, as well as the symbolism and masonry testifies to, that the searchers found the dead man, but couldn't lift him. He also claims that Marcus Garvey did not have the right grip to raise the black man, so God sent them Elijah Muhammad. From what we just read, it is easy to see that Elijah Muhammad drew a great deal of his teachings from Freemasonry and applied them to the Nation of Islam. He also used Masonry to reassure his followers that he was the savior of the black man in America, another Mahdi, another Messiah. Continuing, I believe this is chapter 5 now, says the nation under Minister Louis Farrakhan. Minister Louis Farrakhan made several references to Freemasonry in his speech at the Million Man March. In his first mention of Masonry, he states, "And the layout of this great city laid out by a black man, Benjamin Banneker," a black man. This all placed and based in a secret Masonic ritual, all right? Because Benjamin Banneker was a Freemason, and he did lay out, right, the city, right, in Washington. And at that core of the secret of that ritual is the black man. Not far from here is the White House. And the first president of this land, George Washington, who was a Grand Master of the Masonic Order, laid the foundation, the cornerstone of this Capitol building where we stand. That was Farrakhan saying this. Later in his speech, Minister Farrakhan has this to add about Freemasonry. So I'm going to make a new covenant with you, oh black man. The secret of the Masonic Order is the secret of Hiram Obib. Listen, PH, the secret of the Masonic Order is a master builder that was hit in the head. The secret of the Masonic Order is a master that ruffians roughed up. I think one of the ruffians was named Jubilo, PH, Furman, PH, and another was named Jubilee, Bilbo, and another one was named Julium, Jesse Helms. These races hit him in his head and carried him on a westerly course and buried him in the north country in a shallow grave. Many tried to raise him up, but they didn't have the master grip. It would take a master to come after him. Here he uses some of the same rhetoric as Elijah Muhammad. He just changes countries with names. It's the same thing we just read. You are a white Shriner. The black Shriner don't integrate the shrine. Why don't you black Shriners integrate the shrine? Because in the shrine, you are the essence of the secret. They don't want you there. They'll have to tell the world it's you we've been thinking about all along. For some reason, most of the founders and or leaders of the black Muslim movements have this preoccupation with the shrine. I believe that this all stems back to Noble Drew Ali and his shrine spin-off, the Moorish Science Temple. I'm still trying to figure out how Freemasonry and the shrine fit into the atonement of the black man, which was the purpose of the Million Man March. Minister Farrakhan seems to be steering the Nation of Islam more toward being black militants than the unorthodox teachings of Elijah Muhammad. Most of his public speeches do not mention the beliefs of the Nation of Islam, which leads one to summarize that most joined the Nation of Islam for the black movement and not for the religious aspects of the sect. Oh, wow. And now it goes into the United Nuwabian Nation of Moors, right? Chapter 6 of this book. And we go into Malachi York, huh? Oh, man. I read the big book. I'm not talking about the little book. I'm talking about the complete big book, big black book. Biggest books I read in my life of the Holy Tablets of Malachi York. I've read those, all right? So let's hear what it says. The United Nuwabian Nation of Moors was founded by Dr. Malachi C. York, whose title is Supreme Grand Master. He's a Grand Master Mason in 1967 in Brooklyn, New York. At this time, he used the name Amunubi Ruak Pita. The name of his group was called the Ansar Pure Sufi. He had so many different groups, guys, and movements and names too. His first group of followers were mainly stray black Muslims. In 1969, they changed their names to the Nubian Islamic Hebrews, and again changed their name in 1972 to the Ansaru Allah community, which followed Orthodox Islam beliefs. In 1993, they purchased a 476-acre game ranch in Eatonton, Georgia. At this time, they took their current name, the United Nuwabian Nation of Moors. They called their complex Tamari, or the Egypt of the West, Tamari, beloved land. Tamari, that's the real name of ancient Egypt, Tamari, Amari, America. They claim that they are part of a Native American tribe called the Yamasee, and they are ancestors of Egyptians who migrated from the Nile Valley to Georgia countryside prior to the continental drift that separated the continents. They migrated over here, but they were over here before they separated. Make it make sense. This is the ancient Egypt. Can't give you the full truth, but just relating, like the Washita Moors also relate to Yamasee. Everybody there's a Moor or Pan-African kind of relate to Yamasee and Olmec, and they mix all this history up. It's big. Gotta dodge the hijack a little bit. And if we could probably break that down more, but we have done it in the past. Why I'm saying that. So it says here, at the entrance to the complex is a sign that states the Nuwabians as a fraternity, lodge number 19 of the ancient mystic order of Melchizedek. Dr. York seems to have molded his version of Freemasonry and shrine rituals into his own religion, as we will see in the following paragraphs. His main teaching is that religion is a spell, and that the only person who can save you is yourself, and we should receive our rewards here on earth instead of the afterlife. They practice no specific religion and believe in living harmoniously with Mother Nature. They claim to be a fraternal organization consistent of all races and faiths. The group's sacred text consists of York's 460 books called scrolls. Dr. York claims to be an extraterrestrial being. Listen, all right? He did say this. I read his book. He claims to be an extraterrestrial being from the 19th galaxy called Ilium, and he arrived on planet Earth on March 16, 1970. This is what he told people. On this date, the comet Bennett's was visible, which he claimed was his spacecraft. The organization has also borrowed some of its teachings from the Theosophical Society founded by Helena Blavatsky. All right? You guys know that. And you know she was under Jamal Afghani too, that mystic, ancient mystic noble master, who was also one of Drew Ali's people who initiated him into his Shriner secret society. Yeah, Helen Blavatsky studied under the same person. And she was a prominent Freemasons, right? So wait a minute. So they're saying York was influenced by Blavatsky and prominent Freemasons named William Wynne Westcott and William Whitman. Dr. Malachi Z. York, 33 degrees or 720, as he claims, right? Remember, 360 spiritual, 360 physical. He claims to have deep ties to the Masonic fraternity. According to an email exchange, Ezekiel, who is a Mason and a Moor, as well as a member of the Prince Hall Research Society, Dr. York has stated that he was the Imperial Grand Potentate internationally. He is also the leader of the Mahdi Temple 19 in Illinois. He claims to be a 33 degree in the ancient Egyptian order and nobles of the mystic shrine of the northern and southern jurisdiction. He is also the Grand Master of the Nuwabian Grand Lodge, Ancient Free and Accepted Masons, Inc., Ramses II, Mer number 9. He also states that he is a Scottish Rite Freemason of Amos Grand Lodge of Macon, Georgia, and Deputy Grand Master of Pride of Georgia Lodge, AF and AM. All right? He states that he was commissioned to rewrite the handbook for the International Supreme Council of Shriners because it contained many errors, and he could translate the original Arabic into English. The lodges that he claims to have been raised in are not recognized by either the Prince Hall Grand Lodge or the Grand Lodges of the various states. He states that he went to Egypt and other Arab and African countries and found the true teachings of Freemasonry. He is quoted to have said, "So we move and work on a much higher levels that the sects that the original doctrine has divided into by self-righteous leaders. Something that must be done away with. After they finish their 32 or 32nd degree or their 12th degree of the Knights Templar, they become Muslims." All right, you guys hear that? Templar. Anyway, so this is the civilizing of the Greeks and doesn't really apply to us, the true seed of the Quraysh tribe, the Black Arabs. He's like, I don't have to go through all that. I'm the book. Dr. York has also written 2 books on the subject of Freemasonry. One is titled Prayers for the Sons of Light, a Masonic prayer book from 1 to 33, and also the Universal Lessons of the Masonic Lodge, the Secret Degrees and Studies of M.M. Master Mason. All right, those are his books. Almost every picture you see of York, he is wearing some sort of Masonic regalia. His followers wear shrine fezzes and are seen quite often wearing them in public, which causes some confusion for the people of Georgia because they associate this group with the Ions. He has somewhat successfully made Freemasonry a religion, and his compound shows how much money and resources his followers are willing to give up to follow his teachings, man. All about the money back, so much money, right? And we move on, I believe chapter 7 says here, Nation of Gods and Earths, the 5%ers, the 7%ers, 5%ers. In the name of Allah, 7%, 7 says, the nation of gods and earth, or otherwise called the 5%ers, were founded in 1964 by Clarence Jower Smith, who was a former member of the Nation of Islam's Temple Number 7 in New York City's Harlem district. You see how they're all connected, right? They were then known as the 5% Nation of Islam. Clarence was a lieutenant in the Fruit of Islam and a student minister, all right? He was in the military part of the Nation of Islam. He's one of the bodyguards, the Fruit of Islam. He held beliefs that did not follow the teaching of Elijah Muhammad and was suspended from the Nation of Islam for teaching classes that did not follow the nation's norm. He was called by his followers Father Allah and claimed to be God himself, okay? We got another Mahdi, another Messiah. He founded the Allah School in Mecca and claimed that Harlem was Mecca and Brooklyn was renamed Medina. The meetings of the group are called parliaments. He reinterpreted the Nation of Islam book of Lost Found Lessons, which are arranged in questions and answers, answer form, familiar with the Freemasons, which resulted in the table below. His message included a system of teachings, which he called Supreme Mathematics and the Supreme Alphabet. The website, thetalkinddrum.com, states, for 5%ers, Islam is less a religion than a science that can break down ordinary words through linguistic gymnastics. For instance, in the Supreme Alphabet, A stands for Allah, which broken down stands for arm, leg, arm, head. So where do they get that from? That's what they're saying though, right? Thereby proving that the divinity of Allah is physically present in the humankind. Each letter is called a degree, according to their doctrine. Once one memorizes the lost found lessons of the divine sciences, they become fully divine. Men then take the name God and women take the name Earth, which is a twist of Gnostic tendency with Afrocentric teachings, Gnosticism, Hermetics. On a webpage about the 5%ers, the author states this about Freemasonry. The 33 degree was given to them to clean themselves up in their savage state of existence. These degrees deals with the fifth science known as geometry. Geometry and working tools was used for them to build themselves a living quarters to dwell in and not continue to live in the caves that they were confined or bound in. This science of masonry was given to free them from their savage way of life, to begin to bring a civil character to the white man. Thus the name Freemasonry. This is why not black men or women should not be Freemasons, for this was not given or meant for them. Black people are the originators of mathematics and science. We share this with the white man in order for him to clean themselves up. Many of their teachings go along with that of the Nation of Islam, and that the white man is the devil, but they also include all unscrupulous and deceitful people in this category, regardless of color. Their belief teaches them that the black race was the original race and the creator of civilization. They break down the African American community as follows: 85%, the masses who are ignorant of true divine self; 10%, the corrupt rulers over the 85%, in their own community, right? 5%, the truly righteous followers of Father Allah, the 5%ers, right? That's why they're called the 5%ers. His teachings also included carryovers from the Nation of Islam, and that the original man, black man, was the supreme being or God. He stated that supreme means the most high, being means to exist. God, therefore, is the name given to the highest form of existence, the black man. Many of the members of the 5%ers are of the younger generation of African Americans. From what I can tell, they are basically black nationalists who want to belong to a religious group, but do not want to live up to the strong moral teachings of the other black Muslim groups. All right, that's what he's saying about that. So, conclusion of the book for the dismount says the black Muslim groups grew out of Freemasonry. They grew out of Freemasonry. They simply changed the teachings to interchange with their version of Islam. For all intent purposes, these groups were formed to be black nationalist organizations, right? Gray on color, you so-called black. Separate, now you go with the tag. Under the veil of religion. Under the veil of religion, black became a religion. They have filled the void of unity in the black community, yet none of these groups really have brought black people together. The true tenets of Freemasonry would do much do a much better job at bringing people together and to focus on improving oneself instead of blaming others for their problems. These groups have placed a great divide within the Black community that continues to this day. Many people who join these groups simply wish to belong to something, regardless of the theology or sacrifices they must make. While the leaders line their pockets with the hard earned money of their members, again, while the leaders line their pockets with the hard earned money of their members, I truly believe that Prince Hall Freemasonry does more for the Black community and its young men than all these groups put together. All right, you hear that? So that's how he ended his book. He's just snitched on himself, the author. He's a Prince Hall. He don't like the other ones. He's like, this, I'm more of a legit one, and we help people. We help people. All right. How does he know so much? Because he's a Prince Hall. All right. Again, this was the book, The Craft and the Crescent. All right. Freemasonry and the Black Muslim Movement in America by Michael R. Schneider. All right. The Craft and the Crescent. I hope you guys enjoyed that reading too, this book as well today. We read these two books, kind of telling us almost a little bit, kind of going together, you see, with the origin, the background of these people, these so-called leaders. I just got to tell you guys, hopefully this helps you see you can't just follow people blindly. And again, this is not personal. Don't take it personal like we're attacking. We're just trying to show you something maybe you didn't think about. There is a coincidence. There's some commonalities with these people and their background and how they all started a movement, based on that knowledge or those connections, right, that they had before they became leaders. This is all I wanted to show. All right, we're going to continue all the other series. We're going to continue reading other books as well. But I appreciate you guys allowing me to redo the video and, the very first 10 minutes because it was really bad cutting off yesterday. And I was able to just re-record everything today. I hope you guys enjoyed the reading from both books. Hope you gained some understanding and background to some people. Again, appreciate you guys taking your time out of your day to come hear me read. I'll give you your day back. Once again, much love. Pura vida, mi gente. Hawa.